blame, I do not blame the children for wanting to be reassured that they are not crazy.
That's right. In prisons.
Mhm.
Okay. Are we
We can keep going.
Okay. Even when I started teaching in prisons, everybody was running to the men's prison. There was not one academic class at the women's prison. So, I talked to this guy who funded the education at the men's prison. I said, do you know there's nothing going on at the women's prison? He said, well, if you can get in, then I'll fund a class. But think about it, there is a margin on the margin.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And so went over there. I got lucky in that one of my former students was teaching a workshop there, and
Right.
had me come to do a presentation. Then I saw, because of mass incarceration, one of my smartest students, there she was in the women's prison. And I said, let's say her name is Geneva. Geneva, hi, where have you been? She said, here. She said, could you come here and teach a class? I said, that's what I really want. She said, okay, I'll try to make it happen among the inmates, right? Among the women, she doesn't say inmates, among the women there. And if you can use your privilege at the top, I'll use my organizing among the masses. We'll make it happen. And I went to the superintendent, and I walked in, and the superintendent was my student.
Wow.
He said, well, hello, Professor Sheppard. And I said, and so I told him what I wanted to do, and he said yes. But I'm an artist, and I'm a materialist in that, and I'm dialectical, blah, blah, blah. But I also believe in magic.
Yes.
But magic conjures.
You can't have magic outside of the community. You need the community for magic.
That's right.
Yes.
And it conjures up and finds itself and makes itself invisible, to go back to what you said, when we do the work.
When we do the work, and when we
manna doesn't fall from heaven. You got to do the work.
That's what Asada Shakur says. She said, if you want to, and paraphrase, she goes, you have to go do the research. You have to find out for yourself, and you have to be willing to accept the hardest thing and the thing that also helps you. You can't just make up this false narrative that instantly empowers you. You have to take history for what it is, so that way you know exactly what it is you need to do.
Right.
Let me read the introduction.
Okay.
We're live, and we're already starting the conversation. And
I love talking to you.
I know it may not feel like it yet, but welcome back, Augustonians, and happy spring. And welcome to our newcomers as well. My name is Jessica Lanay. I'm an art journalist, poet, and the host and curator of Lit Friday. Lit Friday is a virtual monthly program from the August Wilson African American Cultural Center, where on the final Friday of each month, we have conversations with artists and writers of the African diaspora about their work in relation to contemporary topics. To keep up with our programming, visit the events page at awaacc.org, or you can follow me on Instagram at hanginThere_Kitty, Kitty. Before I introduce our incredible guest, we're going to synchronize our calendars. If you're a fan of the 8-time Grammy Award-winning bassist, composer, and band leader, Christian McBride, he's with us in-house on April 9th. Get your tickets. On April 18th, we continue with our program Intermission, the Artful Happy Hour series. I was there last night. It was incredible. You can't miss the party. On April 23rd, we continue our Storytime Spotlight series with Catherine Calhoun. And Lit Friday returns on April 26th with Mara Cheeks, author of the novel Acts of Forgiveness. Publishers Weekly calls Cheeks' debut novel engrossing. And after you get your dose of Lit Friday, also on April 26th, you're still going to need to come down to the August Wilson African American Cultural Center to see the Grammy Award-winning singer, songwriter, and producer, Maya. She's in town, and I'm sure she doesn't want to miss you just as much as you don't want to miss her. And now for our guest of honor. Gilda Sheppard, PhD, is an award-winning filmmaker who has screened her documentaries throughout the United States, internationally in Canada, Ghana, South Africa, the Festival Afrique Cannes Film Festival, Nigeria Abuja Film Festival, and in Germany at the International Black Film Festival in Berlin. Sheppard is a 2017 Hedgebrook Fellow for Documentary Film, 2019 recipient of an Artist Trust Fellowship, 2023 Best Director, New York Independent Film Festival, and awarded Best Feature Documentary for August Wilson Black Bottom Film Festival. Sheppard is faculty emerita of Sociology, Cultural and Media Literacy at Evergreen State College in Tacoma. Follow her work, learn more about her at you can follow her work and learn more about her at Facebook at Since I've Been Down, and Instagram also at Since I've Been Down, which is the title of the documentary that we'll mostly be talking about today. So Gilda, you've made more time for us. I met you at the Black Bottom Film Festival, and just after our amazing conversation there, I had to bring you to Lit Friday because I need to find out more about your work, your practice, your inspirations, and check in on all of the family that you made while making the documentary Since I've Been Down.
Yes, indeed. When you said the word family, that's true. I had such a wonderful conversation with you, Jessica. I wanted to put you in my pocket and take you home with me. Like, I want to talk to Jessica about this idea, And so when we meet like that, and not only matters of the mind, but also matters of the heart and whatever the soul is, so that we can not just validate one another, but also extend one another's imagination, the work we do, talk about things that attempt to ambush us and what we do with that, concepts and those kinds of things, and you are so brilliant in the work that you are doing. No, really. You got it going on, right? Sometimes, when people are working on their PhDs, all the other degrees that you have, you think, okay, I can't talk to them because they got the new language. You're able to go there and go a lot of different places with it. So it is really an honor to be here, Jessica. Just an honor.
I always try to remember, can I talk to my great grandmother about this?
There you go.
And if I don't have the language to talk to my great grandmother about this, then it kind of becomes, it loses its function, because who's listening? Like, if my great grandma can't get what I'm saying or get down, then what are we really doing? But before we continue this long love affair of a conversation, I'm going to show the trailer to Since I Have Been Down, and I'm going to share my screen.
Okay.
Oops, let me get the sound.
Who commit crimes should, there must be no doubt about whose side we're on. People who commit crimes should be caught, convicted, and punished. You will be put away for good. 3 strikes and you are out.
In 1993, Washington State was the first state to implement the 3 strikes policy and make it okay to put people in prison and throw away the keys.
Young kids were getting involved in horrendous violence. Things were spiraling wildly out of control.
The face of the threat became young Black and brown men.
This is our help. Don't come here.
The police would round them up for whatever reason they could.
What you doing here? You don't live around here. Some people didn't commit crimes and were just caught up. My friends is either in prison forever or dead.
My name's Kamani Carter, and I'm currently serving a life sentence. My history is the life of a lot of kids out there in our community. And my reality as a young man doing life in prison will be their future if we don't start creating better ways of dealing with our children.
Somebody who was 18 years old at the time of the crime, you don't know who he's going to be 20 years on.
It's about being able to see the Kamani that I've become, not the Kamani that I once was. For a lot of those kids, I don't think that they've matured enough to calculate the consequences for their actions.
He was 11, and the gays are already starting the recruiting process.
A lot of advances that people in society are seeking will be found in prison. We've caused pain. We caused pain primarily because we was in pain.
The Black Prisoners Caucus is about liberation.
the more that we begin to educate ourselves, the more empowered we become.
Created a support group for positivity in the most unlikely of environments.
You're never too old to find that peace with yourself.
Victims are perpetrators, perpetrators are victims. And we're all victims of this system.
So it says coming soon, but it has obviously come and is still going with so much success. You were explaining to me before we went live that there are young children demanding that their schools show this to them.
Yeah. Young children as well as educators, teachers. Kamanti Carter, who is out of prison now, but when he was in prison, I had him call in from prison and post screening, because I think as a filmmaker, as a public intellectual, as an organizer, as a prison abolitionist, as a Black intersectional feminist, I think it's extremely important to have proximity. And so he would come on through, you wouldn't see him, but you could hear him. But his voice is what he said was what struck people so well. And also in the film, so kids are trying to negotiate and navigate this system where children now will see more police in schools than they have nurses or counselors. And to have a young man to go through our urban neighborhoods that have been gentrified, because Black communities are not just full of gang infested, but it is because of systemic policies like gentrification, which brings police in after drugs, and then they flatten it out, right? The kids go to prison because 3 strikes you're out started in Washington State, not in California, in Washington State. So when children, young people look at that and able to get a systemic analysis of why they are sitting where they are sitting, because kids don't grow up and say, I want to be in a gang. That's what I want to be. You know, I want to sell rock cocaine or something like that. So they saw some meaning in this. They saw some possibility. They saw some imagination in this. That in spite of these individuals, because one of the people in my class, I've been teaching in prison for a long time, he was 13 when he came to the adult prison. 13, young Black kid. Yes, everyone in my film, I'm not saying they didn't commit the crime, but I also say, what are the systemic reasons that gave these young people a non-negotiable pathway? So these children look at the film as their salvation. I remember Bell Hooks said that I was hurting inside till I found theory. Then I could name it. They were able to name it. So they go to their teachers, the teachers, then if the teachers see it, then they will bring it to their school. So it's been going really around a lot of schools. And even during the pandemic, one of the reasons why these kids saw it is because we couldn't go to film festivals and it was always online. And so we got the brother and sister on the corner. They don't go to the film festivals.
Right.
So you make a way out of no way. And so I would, it's going to be at the Big Sky Film Festival. I said, everybody, let's have popcorn. Get you guys come to the house, your houses, and watch it. And they told their relatives and their relatives and their relatives, and that's how it just fueled throughout communities in that way. And so, so they're asking for, the Washington State Supreme Court asked to see it. Washington State Supreme Court asked to see it. And then it's not because of the film, it's one of the variables in the film. Changed laws about brain science so that like I said, this one kid had been in prison. He says the second time he's been in prison. I said, what do you mean? He's, I came to prison when I was 13, but the first time is my mother gave birth to me in prison.
Oof.
And now you think, oh God, what a terrible, no. The mother had a public health issue. She was addicted to drugs. Drugs addiction is a public health issue.
So
Is it?
I have so many questions. So
Okay.
from that statement alone, I have like three questions.
Okay.
The first question is about the structure of the film and the narrative of it. Because usually in the United States, we're exposed to documentaries and films about the prison industrial complex, like things produced by the Innocence Project, where it's a failure of the system they're focusing on, or the person is innocent. And this is the salvation. The person's already innocent. Your work is another matter entirely because, like you said, you're like, I'm not saying they didn't do it, but this is really about thinking about the sensitivity of being human, forgiveness, self-redemption, and
Wow.
about us really beginning to complicate this idea of being markless, this idea of being totally innocent, which is actually a form of like inhumanity to require someone of this. Sometimes the ways that we lose innocence aren't even our fault, right? We don't have any control over that. I want to know about how you built this narrative so powerfully for an the that's been trained through media to be incredibly punitive about some of the people that embody these stories.
Right. Well, you know, I had to use my imagination too. Imagination is really a social practice. I remember Bell Hooks says that, you know, punishment has been the practice of when, particularly children, but when anything goes wrong, let's punish them. And then if you keep doing it, you're picking up so-called weeds, but you're not irrigating the soil.
Yes.
And when I went to prison to teach, let me tell you how I did it. I was doing an ethnographic documentary in Ghana, West Africa, in a refugee camp. You know, scholars go far away. Not that I shouldn't have done it, but at the end of the film, the last day, this one woman said, you know, Sis Gilda, the same AK-47s that you see in the streets in the war in Liberia are on in your streets and in your children's hands. And you need to do something about that. These are children. Okay? So you wonder, not only is it a brain science about your frontal lobe, but it's also poverty. And it's also disinvestment in communities. And I wanted people to see the humanity of these children. That's the reason why I continue to punctuate it with faces of kids, even kids with masks on playing, because in Liberia Civil War, they wore masks, these kids. Sometimes they had a teddy bear tucked in there with their guns and things, or it was their children. But the algorithms that they're fed, right, it says that there's no hope but to do this. And I know this film challenged because I am not trying to say that they didn't commit the crime. I'm saying look at humanity. And so I wanted to not breed sentimentality or oh, those poor Black kids. I wanted people to also be able to see their children as vulnerable to this, but also see how horrible it is, particularly with folks who are most marginalized, right? You know, I read this quote that said, how we punish says more about us than who we punish.
Absolutely.
And I wanted to expose this culture of punishment. And what best way to do it is with mass incarceration. But I did not want slow fade in the gore. I wanted to show the triumph of the human spirit. And that's what Since I've Been Down does. It shows the triumph of the human spirit. It shows how these gentlemen were part of a Black prisoners caucus and developed it into something that went cross race lines, cross ideological lines, cross religious and spiritual lines to come together to talk and learn. I wanted to show not just this as a this particular incident as separate. I wanted people to see that this neighborhood that I'm talking about, or these neighborhoods of this city, Tacoma, Washington, is every town USA.
Yes.
Every town. And it's what we do to our children. So there is this broader narrative that I wanted to show, but also, you know, sometimes I think America's dirty little secret is that we don't like kids. You know what I mean?
You know, it's so interesting because when we're thinking about Western history and Western culture, so much of racism is based in a really warped idea of the infantile, and the infantile being a lack of education, a lack of sophistication, a lack of ability to communicate. And then that comes to double and become synonymous with being Black, with being Indigenous. And so I think that these things are closely connected. A former Lit Friday guest we had is Antonio Howard. And Antonio Howard was incarcerated for about 16 years for an event that he was associated with. But he went into jail as a child and became an artist while he was in, and wrote his own autobiography about his experience. It was his memoirs and diaries. And he said the same thing you said. This is about how we think about children as not being human, and how vectors of how we conceptualize around race, disability, and gender can really, really begin with the disenfranchisement and dehumanization of the child.
That's right.
And we're also seeing it in contemporary moments like Gaza, right? The dehumanization of the children, seeing, you know, educated politicians standing on TV and saying, well, I don't really know how old they were, as an excuse for a kind of brutality that we seem to balk at, but we allow in our everyday. And so I guess my question is around, like, could you say more about your perception of our relationship with children, and how we treat children really, really primes us to treat everybody else around us in our life. And how this leads to an experience of being incarcerated at 13 years old before you even probably, you know, like, do whatever, complete a test without needing help from your teacher, but all of a sudden you're a criminal. You're an apex predator, as Hillary Clinton would say.
Right. You know, the thing about it is that there's hardly any resources for children. Oftentimes, both parents got to work or they don't, you know, and there are not a lot of places where children can be children and use their imagination and be supported for that. It is, if you got it, not the process of doing the problem that you're solving, but did you get the correct answer?
Right.
And that becomes the metaphor for life. Kamonte Carter, who's my main person in this film, that is like the griot who takes us around, says that, because they started an education program, they said, we go as fast as our slowest student.
Yes.
Can you imagine that? And when he says slow, he's not talking about not smart. He's talking about a rhythm, a dance. He's talking about diversity. If I may go take the scenic route to go to go get some water, somebody else may go straight faster. But that doesn't mean that my scenic route or my ability to get to this problem and solve it is incorrect. There's this master narrative that there's one way to do it, right? For children, they're not allowed to make mistakes. They're not even allowed to have a bad day. And if they do,
learn openly.
Right. Like I said, you know, there's a statistic that says there's 14 million police officers in schools in the United States, and hardly any nurses or social workers or counselors and those kinds of things. It's like children they're not human, that they're automatons, that they're robots. I'm not saying, I hate to do this like it's slow fade into gore, because it's not. Because that's the reason why Kamonte Carter and his colleagues, when they started this education program, it's an acronym that says TEACH. taking education and creating history, not changing it. So children are not even seen to be able to share power. The other day when, and create history. We're constantly, at best, sometimes we want to change it, right? Don't do this, don't do that. No, let's create it as well. We were talking at Kamonte Carter and I at the school. It was a middle, it goes from 8th grade. No, it goes from kindergarten to 8th grade. And they were saying, well, how do you create a liberatory education? And Kamonte says is that by sharing power. And so I am not saying that, okay, he comes to the he or she or them, and they come to the front of the class and just do the class. But you can do even little small groups where one person does this and teaches that, and they have the sense of responsibility. But that imagination of doing those kinds of things. But it's rote learning oftentimes, and it is who got the test correct. So we are socialized in a kind of punishment. I'm not saying all schools do this or all teachers. I think teachers get a bad rap.
Absolutely.
But and then they're confined in this little space that sometimes they have to teach to the test. I think and so this punishment that children experience impacts their imagination, and what do? They do the same thing. They start to punish.
It also disables them from learning leadership skills.
Real leadership skills,
really
not leadership skills as a height. Yeah.
Without learning how to be a liberatory leader, right?
Right. And not leadership skills like, yeah, right, a liberatory leader, that I am the one who is on top. We're not talking about hegemony. Adrienne Mary Brown, I was reading something about her. She was saying that there is nothing wrong with hierarchy if it's a division of labor, responsibility, but this hegemonic kind of, and it's not only hegemony, dominance and control by people, but it's also by curriculum and narratives. What narratives are we going to allow? They can't even hardly say race in the school now. There's one child told me his book was banned at the library because I think it was called The New Kid. And I don't know the book, but I think it had maybe one gay character. And it was taken out of the library. What does that tell children? Who's normal, who's abnormal?
We're sabotaging their ability to be compassionate.
Yes, you said it.
They're sabotaging their ability to be empathetic and experience humanity with people who are different than them.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, that's a lot of it. And so and now they're building, instead of looking at what's going on in schools, they're building more youth jails.
In cop cities.
Punishment. I used to think myself, whenever I thought about justice, I looked at it as only comes in when somebody commits a crime. Okay, let's talk about justice. And in the film, this guy was saying, he said, this classroom right here is justice. Lit Friday is justice. I mean, and so, but so often we look at it connected to a good or a bad or a crime or non-crime and those kinds of things, and no alternatives to it, yeah.
I was thinking about this yesterday. I guess I'll mention this every few Lit Fridays. I'm writing my dissertation, and as people who are doing that do. And I was reading a Pew Research Center study that most violent and property crimes go unsolved. Yeah. And this made me think about the expansion of the prison industrial complex into society vis-a-vis the socialization of systems of punishment. And I was like, well, then this means that to a certain extent, our legal system and its arbiters are just a theater. It's a theater meant to produce the feeling of safety And it holds narratives in place by making the enemy easy to identify, even if the facts, or even if the information about the other, you know, people who are dangerous is untrue. But the theater, the potential for violence against your body from the state holds these very clean narratives in place, where you have the people who need to feel safe, feeling safe, and everyone else kind of believing that chaos is inherent when it is not. Humans have a tendency to order themselves.
Yeah. What's normal,
What's
right?
normal.
Yeah, the myth of normality. Yeah, you're right. And so, well, you know, people will say, well, what do you expect them to do? This is how they are.
Yes.
What alternatives? So there's not a sense of, I'm a prison abolitionist, right? And I'm not talking about let everybody out of prison. What I'm saying when I say that I want to create a world that we don't need them, that we have better mental health possibilities, that we have a distribution of income that allows people not to have lavish, but to have their needs met. Okay? That the social emotional learning, that social emotional landscape is part of the learning. I said, did you ever have a curriculum on love? They said, no. I said, how can we do that? I said, tell me something that you're teaching. He said something about what was it? It was a science experiment. And I said, so what, I mean, how could you put love in that? And he went on and on and on. But our imaginations are stuck in this tight chemise, you know, where we don't have time to even think about how we can expand to something that sounds impossible. Yeah. You think about a 13-year-old in prison. I would think that is impossible, that this person can come out and be a working adult who's thriving, you know, because prison is horrible, right? 13, but because of community, you know, people heal not individually. They feel that they heal in communion. And that's the reason why we in community need to come up with these new kinds of things, but also make sure that we share the power. That, I mean, we can talk about what needs to be done, and we could talk about it without any proximity to the subject. And that's the reason why in this film, the narrative, the people who are telling the story are the people who are experiencing the harm and the triumph of the human spirit. Who better to do that? Right? But oftentimes we'll go, and I can say that I've been a person who's done this, and, you know, with my good heart, and think about what we need to do. And around the table, it's not even the subject. And I don't mean pandering and being like, okay, what do you need? What do you need? No. But being part of it, but understanding that their reference point has more visibility than ours. We bring a lot to the table. I mean, we studied this chart, and we know this, we got best practices, but they know when someone hits you over the head, how it feels.
It's like in the trailer, the gentleman said, it's the people who are inside that have the solutions that you need.
Right.
And I never forgot that from the first time I saw the film, the second time I saw it, and every time I hear it, I get shivers down my spine, because no one can educate you on what needs to be done to solve the problem than the people who've been forced to live in the problem.
I mean, come on. Right.
But we do everything we can to sabotage people in the problem to make it seem like they're unreliable when it comes to these things.
Right. And we are not saying that, okay, I'm not being essentialist with this. Everybody's been in prison, they have the answer. But I'm saying that it's there. I mean, Dostoevsky said, now we listen to him, you want to know a sign of civilization? Open the door of the prison. You don't know where we are in civilization? Open the door of the prison. Right? That'll tell you where we are. Because I'm not saying that everybody that been in prison and gets out has the answer or has the process or da 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 da. I'm saying that that process is created and constructed by community. And that community must include the subject, not just as a statistic, like, oh, we got 3, but, that engages and is able to teach and, those kinds of things. So, yeah.
So also during our conversation, we're talking about how this could not have happened without you building a family.
Yeah.
Tell us about how long it took to do the documentary.
Yeah.
And how you as an artist and a professor and a scholar and all these other things maintain your connection or built family from the people that we're a part of since I've been down, and how you maintain that familial connection with everything that's going on. I think people approach projects like this sometime where they show up, they do it, and then they disappear forever. And maybe it's because there's no social practice around the art that they're producing. But I wanted to hear about your experience with this and how it informed your imagination.
Oh, so it took me about 12 years to do this documentary. Well, you got to get in prison. And I'm glad it took me 12 years because I went from Dr. Sheppard, Professor Sheppard, to Auntie Gilda, to Mama G. And when you said familial, that's exactly what happened. We created family. So I'm Auntie Gilda to a lot, and they're my nephews and my nieces, and all that. But I was also able to meet their families and have not only because the subject is not just a person in prison, right? The subject is their families too. Because when a person goes to prison, their family goes to prison.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, it's also the victims of their crime. I start the documentary out with the victim sitting in a car similar to the car that she was shot in. My main storyteller shot and killed her best friend. I told her, I want her, is it okay? I let her know that that's what we're going to do. And she said, yeah, I can do it. And she sat there, and because I also think being in a context, if it's not traumatizing, as an artist, context. And a friend of mine was just going out doing, getting location shots, right? I wanted it to be authentic as possible, to also trigger her imagination to things. But I talked to her before that because I didn't want to re-traumatize her in anything, because it could do that, right? And I'm sure some of the other folks who are victims, it may do that. And that's the difficult part of it. But that community, that family includes the victims. It includes the family, and both blood and non-blood family. It includes the gangs. I have a section of that where this guy is talking about being a gang member. And he said, we loved one another. Who would ever think that? Teaching 11-year-old how to shoot an AK-47 to rep his hood. Why don't we take those kinds of things where they come into this scenario with, I'm repping my hood, I'm taking care of my hood. Tell me about that. What does
that mean to you?
What does that mean, so that they can reflect? In the film, this one guy says, he said, when you're 15 or 16, riding around with a gun, just trying to prove that you are somebody. Trying to prove that you are somebody. And he says, we avoid reflection at all costs. They don't want to think about, I killed somebody. I know that this is horrible language, right? Or shot at somebody. They don't think, and if and when they do, it's bravado that seems very theatrical, And so I was able to get the psychology, what they were thinking about. Driving around with a gun, getting ready to do a drive-by. Don't you think we need to know that, so that if you're going to, and that's the kind of information also can help with the resolution or the resolving or the process of keeping our kids safe and keeping our communities safe. I know safe, I was at this meeting the other day and they said, safe is not what we use anymore. We use brave. And I'm like, well, I'm gonna stay with safe a little bit. And brave, what do you mean? And so how best? I mean, you go to a doctor, they say, what are your symptoms? Talk to me about it. How does it feel? When I push like this, how does it feel? You are directing the doctor. The doctor's getting the information and making a diagnosis, but that doctor couldn't do that. It was pivotal without you, right? But those practices are different, particularly when because let's be clear, this is white supremacy too. Let me tell you, if Kamonte Carter, who shot up the car, if he had gotten out of the car and shot and did the same thing, he wouldn't have gotten a life sentence. Only shooting from a car do you get a life sentence. Who shoots from a car? Who do drive-by? I mean, I even hate to put it out like that. You follow me? Because you don't want nobody to do that. But it is still targeted towards Black and brown. And part of that is policymakers need to hear Kamonte and these kids around this table solving this problem, or creating, some kind of things to mitigate or get people to not just be empaths, but liberators.
I mean, but this is
liberatory education.
Policymakers are the people who are sitting at the tables right now without the subject.
Yes, exactly.
And oftentimes come from backgrounds where they can't even imagine.
Can't even imagine. And we're not being essentialists, but if you walk into I don't want a mechanic to work on my car. I hate to do something non-human, but I don't want someone who's I'm about to have an operation, someone who's never doesn't know anesthesiology. I want someone who knows that. And how did you know that I had, that somebody had a problem? They can explain their illness to you. They can talk about it. But so often kids don't have the language to do that. Oftentimes, they just want to be loved. I remember there was this thing, Margaret Mead, the anthropologist, somebody asked her, what is your best example of looking at civilization in all of your studies? And I think the guy expected her to say something about clay pots or something. And she said, when I saw a femur bone,
a mended femur bone.
Yeah, that had been healed. That meant that someone stayed with them. Compassion.
Or help them along. Collaborativism.
Yes, that is. Instead of, what we look for the skull that has a knock in it, a hole in it, and say, see, look at that. Or, we look at a clay pot and we don't even realize what the clay pot was even used for. So, but anyway, so I think that us being, what does it mean to be smart? What does it mean to be human, particularly? What does it mean? Because oftentimes, that's what the kids had to do in gangs, sometimes with the rival gang, had to look at them as not being human. And where did they get that? Where did they get that?
Gilda, tell us who you are. Tell us how you got here. We need to hear about your journey as well. We know now that you are the award-winning documentarian, filmmaker, PhD professor, Mama, Auntie G, Mama G.
Yeah, right.
We know this now. But how did we get to Mama G, the scholar, award-winning documentarian?
Thank you. I always, when I was a little girl, I used to sit in a dark closet with a flashlight and a mirror and make images. But that was after, and I had a family that allowed me to be creative and eccentric and all that as a little girl. And I would come out of there after about 20 minutes, maybe half an hour, maybe 45 minutes. And my grandmother would say, what are you doing in there? I said, Grandma, let me show you this image. And she would go in there with me and show it. But got that initially because every day, and I'm telling you, you got to believe me, my grandmother would sit me down to braid my hair and always ask me, what did you learn in school today? She'd always put me in a place of being able to tell a story. And even if I had, didn't tell the truth, she didn't say, now you know good, doggone well you didn't do that. She would laugh and she'd like, but I knew she would pull my hair a little bit, and say, she said, you are going to be a phenomenal storyteller. And so, but I went to school to be a sociologist, but, I always been an activist. I dropped out of graduate school to arrogantly organize in factories. I worked in factories, shipyards, became vice president of the Communication Workers of America, was an operator. And remember you probably don't remember, we had operators, the old operator. Anyway, so I was one of them. And so I worked in organizing, studied Marxism, Leninism, and Criminism. Grace Lee Boggs, I'm from Detroit. And my grandfather was quite the union activist. We'd have he was a member of Marcus Garvey. He worked, and my grandmother too. And but they didn't want to go to Africa. They said, this is our country, we got to build it here, right? So they weren't nationalists. They were internationalists. And we would, on May Day, we celebrate May Day. I had always had activists around me, and I always realized that we can win, but we got to do something. Practice is a criteria of truth. And so I dropped out of graduate school and I started working at Kenworth Truck Company, making trucks and stuff like that. And this one woman told me, she said, you're a good organizer and all that. She said, but I hear you have a graduate degree. And I said, yes, but that's nothing. She said, get on out of here and go get your degree. We'll do this over here. You do that over there. So I went through, I want to say that it's a lot of mistakes I've made, even in all my organizing work, right? But it's extremely important to, and I learned this from, I went to Cuba and worked in construction there, and they would always have self-criticism sessions afterwards. And it wasn't like, you did this. It's more like, it's more like the glass being half full. But you would watch, what did you need to do how to pour the water in that glass to make it full, or maybe didn't want to make it full that day. And I learned the importance of self-critique, self-reflection, and those kinds of things. So it became kind of like my mantra, my chant, if you will. And so it was all those kinds of things that were like the tributaries of me as a Mississippi River. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I was fired in the kiln of that kind of activism. My grandfather told me, he says, oh yeah, you're gonna be a feminist. You must be a feminist. I'm like, I don't even know what that means or how to spell it. But, so I had that kind of unique, and my mother was that way too, as well. My mother I'm the second generation college. My mother went to college, she went to Hampton. And, but because of racism and sexism and class bias, she graduated, but couldn't get a job and was a clerk, right? And so with that knowledge that she had, she helped to organize unions and things. So I come from a long line of activists. And so it just became organic. And then I realized that, and my brother dropped out of school, but he was the most brilliant. Today is his anniversary of his death, so I'm like, ugh. And he's one of the most brilliant men that I ever met. So I realized that even if things befall you, that doesn't mean you're stupid. That doesn't mean you can't make a way out of no way. That doesn't mean you don't have an imagination. So my proximity to all of this helped me to inform my practice and the way I think, the way I feel, and the way I move through the world. Yeah.
So what is going on now with the Black Prisoners Caucus? Give us a
Oh,
brief history.
okay.
Tell us more about Kamanti, and then
Yeah, yeah.
where are they now? Are they in
Okay.
more? Because at the end of the documentary, they were going into more,
Right. Yeah, yeah.
more institutions.
Right. Well, now, the Black Prisoners Caucus now, I think with the help of the film, and when I say the help of the film, it's the individuals inside the film, right? That there are about 12 and 10 and the 14 prisons that are here, and they're in the women's prison. The film has been shown in 30,000 free tablets, over 30,000, in men and women's prisons, jails, and juvenile facilities, and it's in a host of schools, middle school and high school, nationally and internationally, right? I think it's because the narrative is there, and it's because it shows what people can do. It's a triumph of the human spirit. So what they have
Who doesn't
now,
want to be
since the Black,
forgiven in their humanity? Who doesn't want to be forgiven?
yeah. And so now they have Black Person Caucus community group. And so there's these gentlemen and women who are and they have these like educational workshops where they talk about, financial literacy. They're just getting out of prison, technology, and those kinds of things. But they spread it to youth. They have youth come in and they learn together. And sometimes the youth teach them. And so they can become this beautiful collaboration of ideas. There was this book, All Our Kin. I can't, last name Carol, woman who did this book, and it talked about social fathering and social mothering. So they have become the social mothers and the social fathers, and with these kids, they can find a safe place. And they may be banging, but they will come over to him or her. And they're even learning about pronouns too. The thing about it is that was it so much easier? And I'm not just talking about if you say he, she, just naming the pronouns, but understanding the culture that comes out of that. Beyond a sexual orientation, but what are we doing with gender? I learned that from going to the women's prison. It's kind of like a fall in the pit is a gain in wit. It's not that we need to fall to have it done, but if that's all you give me, we're gonna make it work. So it's spread throughout. The film and the work has spread nationally. Yeah. And now the film has also developed a group who does legislative work. We show the film, and on the day that we talk about how to talk to your legislator, and these are people in community, right? And they meet with their legislators, and they demand change. We even, they develop a script because they have the stories and they're compelling. And so the film has gone to do transformative and restorative justice, and that's what art can do. Well, Brecht says that art is not a mirror to hold up to reality, but a hammer with which to shape it.
Exactly, yeah.
And so it has done that, but you got to be intentional. When I did this film, I had 3 impact goals. I wanted to pay attention to the brain science for children. Okay. I also wanted to look at more resources in schools, like counselors and those kinds of things, and where are some stories where it works, right? you know, from youth and from teachers and administrators, right? And then also in Washington State, we have no parole. And the reason why they got rid of parole, and well, there's about 12 to 14 states don't have parole. And the reason why they got rid of parole because of racism. Because Black people come up for parole, Black or Indigenous or Latinx folks come up for parole and they wouldn't get it. So they got rid of it. What they put in place is something worse. So the paradigm is like, oh, this is terrible, this is racism. Using that and then coming up with something very similar, almost, you know, and oftentimes worse. And so it was paying attention to that. A lot of people didn't know we didn't have. One senator told me, oh yeah, we have parole. And I reached over to her, I know, and I whispered, I didn't know it. You know, so I'm not even trying to shame her. I get it. I mean, the narratives don't allow for us to think that that would happen. Or we don't even talk about it. Prisons are way far out here. And sometimes people don't want to let you know that their family members have been in prison, right? And so she says, oh, we have parole. And I said, no, we don't. I said, I think you better not say anything because you're going to embarrass yourself. You know, I didn't want to shame her. I didn't know we didn't have parole till I started doing the film, you know? So, but that's how deep it is. So it is increasing awareness and consciousness of not only things that deal with prison, because I don't look at this as a prison film. I look at this as a film that deals with the triumph of the human spirit, what it means to be human, and the importance for the subject to be part of the process for creating, you know, a better way to do things.
And it's becoming more and more necessary too. We have all of this legislation coming up in different states where you can be jailed because you're houseless. We have an influx of people going into prison. And I think that one thing that maybe the public in the United States is waking up to is this idea that slavery is not illegal. It is a consequence of being charged with a crime. Your McDonald's, your Kroger products, your, you know, these things are being produced by people who have lost their freedom and are being paid cents on a dollar, if anything at all, to keep the products that we consume every day cheap. And I keep thinking about how Since I've Been Down is meeting the trajectory of this new social development. How do you think Since I've Been Down is going to meet these new political challenges that we're facing that keep exacerbating all of our social issues that emerge from misogyny, racism, classism, poverty, hating children? How are these things going to intersect? I feel like there's going to be a part 2 that focuses on this new challenge that we have as a community.
Right. You know, I think what Since I've Been Down was open the curtain so you can see things that have already been constructed and the possibility of an act 3, right? So it opened up the subject. And so I think it's also my responsibility as an artist. If I'm going to open up the subject and maybe expose a sore, a cancer, you know, in our ethos, in our values, in our practice, then I think that's how I am as a filmmaker. My next film needs to, some of the men and women in the film said, you need to do a part 2 of Since I've Been Down. I said, what would it be about? You know, I mean, what? Did good? You know, but I'm sure there's something, you know, you did good. But while I got your attention, I want to put my ear to the ground and say, what's going on? And I am concerned about this kind of robotic culture that is developing. And I don't mean robots like they're going to take over, because they're going to always need us. Now, it's going to affect jobs and everything, but they will always need us. So my next film is called Tricky. And it looks at the role of power, work, and what it means to be human, particularly in the digital age of AI and corporate domination. And it is still, and it's going to be a TV miniseries. So I look at, as an artist, that my next step is to look back so I can move forward. You know what I mean? Like that Sankofa bird, so I can look back and build on that. I always want to put my ear to the ground. I always want to include children. So one of the main characters, and I've never done a narrative like this, a drama, and nor a mini series. But the reason why I say mini series is because that's what people are watching. They are zoning out on them. And didn't want the pandemic to happen, but I tried to make a way out of no way and organized around that, right? And so I say, well, let me go to TV and see what's going to happen. So 5 of us writers are looking at, and it sets place in a warehouse, and it has all these characters, intergenerational characters that are looking at how AI, particularly artificial intelligence, is impacting their lives. And it's tricky. One character is in the Frankenstein and Bell Hooks.
Okay.
I mean, think about Frankenstein. I mean, I know this sounds a little crazy, but Frankenstein is not the monster. Frankenstein is the doctor who created, and but so often because of our paradigm that we look like, oh, and is he a monster? Or was he an alien? What did he really want? And I know this sounds really abstract and all, but it is going to be tricky. So I look at my next step is putting my ear to the ground again and doing what I think art can do. Bell says the function of art is to do more than tell it like it is. It is to imagine what is possible. And so if I think imagination is a social practice, I'm going to do everything I can to create room for people to imagine and hopefully do. I always have an impact in my mind of what I want, yeah.
And for my last question, I always like for these to be creative and open-ended. Gilda, what is the next 2 things for you to learn? What are the next 2 things for you?
Love it. Oh, wow. Ooh, I just love you, Jessica. What are the next 2 things for me to learn? To become more peaceful.
Oof.
Around us is so much war.
That's tough when you're a warrior right here.
Yeah, right. You know what I mean?
You're a warrior right here.
And I do yoga, and there's that warrior pose, and then there's the peaceful warrior. And so, there's war of words, war of ideas, and you turn on TV, Israel and Gaza. I mean, what? And children, and I need to learn the practice of peace. I meditate, I do yoga, go for long walks, blah, blah, blah. I got to, right? I'm a Black woman living in this world. I better do some rituals.
Gotta find something.
I want to know more about peace. And I want also, that's one thing, because I'm bombarded with, like you said, war and punishment, right? And also, I want to know more about the power of what comes to my mind is compassion, contemplation, and silence. But when I say silence, I don't mean, but really deep listening. I want to, because I pray for confidence, clarity, and kindness. Those are the 3 things I pray for. And when I say clarity, I'm not talking about being clever. But oftentimes, if I'm not careful, I am trying to be clever. And I don't want that. Our culture breeds that. How clever are you? But I want to be clear, in a way that there's fog from my eyes and I can see, your humanity, see a person's humanity. Monty Carter started a group called Teach. He went across to, well, he and the Black Persons Caucus went across to the white nationalist gangs in prison, a guy with swastikas all over him. Found a place of connection. And I said, well, is he still part of the, the white nationalist gang? He said, yeah. He said, who better to teach them than him? He's learning. So that kind of silence and deep listening is what I want. Not this thing like, if you're going to be with me, you got to roll. Well, there are some standards, let's be clear. but be able to understand not just people's humanity, but their humanity as agency. So I never thought about that till right now. Whoa, wow, I love that.
No, it is a pleasure to speak to you always. And when Tricky is done, come back.
I will.
We can talk about Tricky, and then we can get your invisible collaborator guest to come onto the
Yeah, right.
to come on the camera and talk about the project as well.
We'll get the invisible guest, who is a phenomenal filmmaker. Her name is Ellen Sumter. She's a phenomenal filmmaker and professor of film and lighting, in California. But anyway, yeah. Do you want me to show a clip or do we go?
We got time for a clip. Show us a clip.
So I would love to show the end of the film, the last one, Mary Flowers.
Let's get that pulled up.
Okay.
Okay.
Or you want me to, because I have it right here. Oh, there you go. Okay. Uh-oh, the audio.
Prison education program.
That's not the correct one?
Yeah, that's the one. But I have no idea why yours skips like that. It didn't come in the audio. Let's try it again.
Okay.
Or you want me to try it? Okay.
This is not about a prison education program. And to be very clear, it is not about the Department of Corrections at all. They just geographically happen to be oppressed there. They could be oppressed anywhere else in the community. It's a trip because we got some class issues going on. There are many of us who do not believe that people who are in prison can have the answers to our problems. We do not believe that the people sleeping under the bridge can have the answers to their reality. Because we have people with PhDs and master's degrees who then have been certified to do that work. And they have been doing it over and over and over and over and over again. I'm in a system where we've had a 10-year plan that has now turned into a 20-year plan, and they just changed the name. And it's game. Those brothers know game.
So for all of the classes that we offer this summer,
we can't wait just for people in prison. Aaron's children have the solutions to our problems. And what we will do in 10 years, if we don't attend to this, we'll be visiting I'm not going to put that on your babies, but it's really the truth. Don't think it's not true. Because they got the DOC, the BOP, the Federal Detention Center, the juvenile system, everybody's in the business. And they're waiting for the education system to fail our babies so that they go in there. And I don't even want to blame DOC because it took a whole lot of institutions to get them there. We failed them. In spite of that, they've got the answer.
Oh, it's skipping. Oh, that's okay. That's a shame because he has this beautiful dance, but it's
That's
skipping.
that spirit that slavery did not kill.
I can see it smoothly on my end.
Oh, good.
That's that spirit that the genocide, that attempted genocide of indigenous people did not kill.
Okay, thank you. You can hear the music too?
Yeah, I can hear the music as well.
Oh, I couldn't hear none of that. It's interesting, but that's good. That's good.
No, the dance, the crumping that he's doing is amazing.
Yeah, he is, and I saw that from hanging out with some of the guys that, some of the gangbangers, right? You know, but he's not in a gang, but they were showing me crumping, so I found somebody who did crumping because the crumping is like in your body, you know, and so it's very interesting. Thank you.
No, thank you. And we're gonna have Gilda back, no problem. I'm looking forward to seeing Tricky pop up on Max and Netflix and Hulu and all of those things. It's gonna happen. But I want to say thank you to everybody who stayed with us. Gilda and I are gonna go over time whenever we talk. That's the rule. But I want to say a very good night to everybody. Enjoy your evening. Enjoy your Easter weekend or whatever you're going to go celebrate. And be well until April 26th, where I'll be back with Mara Cheeks about her debut novel, Acts of Forgiveness. Night,
Ooh,
everyone.
okay, bye. Thank you.